Ebrahim Fakir, Auwal Socio-Economic Research Institute Director of Programs, joins me now to discuss. Good evening, Ebrahim, and thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. The ANC flexing to get control of the cities back. Given how this motion of no confidence against Da Gama in Johannesburg has panned out, albeit by that slim margin, 136 to 132, how strong would you say their position is to unseat the coalition?
Well, I mean, Iman, it's anyone's guess. They're strong at one moment and they're weak at another. They teeter on the brink consistently of either being in office or falling from power and authority. And this is the unfortunate reality that we are faced with. Now, contrary to what parties are saying, that we will do so in the best interests of citizens, our people are telling us we must do X, Y, and Z, quite the contrary. Parties are making these decisions, as was always going to be the case, in the interest of the party. So I would take everything that the parties say with a huge, forget a pinch, but with an entire mountain of salt. So the reality is that all of the parties are in positions which are from one day to another weak, and in another day they might be strengthened, but it's always dependent on a series of realignments which happen day to day, changing and depending on the nature of what the immediate interests are. So just think about this. The local government elections happened in 2021. We are in September of 2022. Parties which voted a particular government in office either broke agreements among themselves, and one of those parties, the EFF, decided that it would help the DA into office, even though it says it's not in coalition, does so and withdraws their support not many months later, simply to be able to play the game of destabilization. And this is their broader strategy. So everyone who gets into some kind of agreement with them, however temporary, is always going to be at the risk of being destabilized, whether it's the ANC or whether it's the DA.
That's so interesting. So, I mean, what you're describing there sounds like the politics of expediency and not the purpose of servitude, which is why political organizations should exist in the first place. It's interesting what you talk about there in terms of the EFF, that it sounds like they are more strategic when we look at this alliance between the EFF and the ANC, not only locally, but nationwide.
Iman, you're using the word strategy fairly loosely. I mean, the question of strategy is, what do you deploy strategy for? Are you deploying strategy to get better outcomes for public government and for the people who that government is serving? Or are you deploying strategy for something that is in your immediate short-term rational interest? And I think the answer here is pretty clear. There's nothing here about stabilizing government. There is nothing here about constructing a coherent program of policy and service delivery. This is merely about deploying, in inverted commas, a strategy. And that strategy is merely a self-serving approach to destabilizing government, so that it is in your immediate interest to be able to maneuver yourself into specific positions. I would bet you that today, whatever one decision is made will probably be reversed in a few months' time, depending on which party's interest is. So what we're having here is, as you call it, expediency, but it's a little worse than expediency. What's going on here is a case of mutual use and abuse. So parties are mutually using each other to foment destabilization, and they're doing so for something that is in their immediate interests. Now, what has happened here is that if you take the case of Johannesburg, forget national, but think of Gauteng. The ANC has lost two of the major metros completely, and the one by a very slim minority. So what do? Instead of constructing a real alternative agenda of oversight and accountability of the new coalition government which is in place, it consistently tries to undermine it either through protest action, through destabilization, and now destabilization to working with parties that it said it would not work with. Then, on the other hand, you have a party which says, no, we would never work with the ANC. But in the process, or in the interest of institutional destabilization, decided to work with someone on an expedient basis, mutually to abuse a party which they claimed they would never work with. And this is in service of what? It's not serving any service delivery agenda. It is not constructing a coherent sort of approach to policy for better and improved service delivery. It is merely about what is in the interest of our party in the immediate sense. This is not even thinking about the party's interests in the next 3 or 4 or 5 years or for the next electoral cycle. It is a much more immediate calculation. And unfortunately, this is the worst of rational actor behavior which is merely about destabilization, incepting an era of both politicized uncertainty, but also institutional ambiguity. So you have public institutions here who are unsure about what their role is now.
Well, given that the outcome in these scenarios, and you've painted a few there, Ebrahim, are things that are not good for the country, by any stretch of the imagination, and in fact, in a counterintuitive way, could threaten the actual survival of the party themselves once people wake up and realize, as you say, that these machinations are really quite plain to see, that it's not about serving you, it's not about serving, public service, it is about the centrality of that self-interest. What is the bigger game here then? If it's not about serving people and it is about self-survival, what are they surviving for to accomplish? Is it about the money? Because I wanted to just mention the city of Johannesburg, for example, has a 73 billion rand budget.
It's precisely about that. I don't need to elaborate any further. It's about the megalomania of getting into accessing public office. And you're accessing public office because public office is the place from which you can engage not just patronage, because patronage politics is a normal part of politics. You become a patron so that you dispense resources to a constituency in society which you believe needs development, which is your client in a way. And we know where that need lies. It's in the townships, it's amongst Black South Africans. But of course, once a government is elected, it is meant to serve all South Africans, all voters, all people in that constituency. This is not about that. It is about a kind of pork barrel politics, which is to serve narrow, not even social groups, but narrow interest groups which are in the party who want to access public office because they are going to not only gain position, but gain access directly to resources. So that's the first set of problems. The second set of problems is out of this mutual abuse of each other. It's not just distrust in the parties which start to decline. The issue is much more serious. You talking about mistrust of the parties. The question here is about the mistrust of the entire democratic governance system. And the election results, the participation rates, the rates over the 2021 local and the 2019 national elections are telling you just the degree to which South Africans are withdrawing from the political process overall. So this is not about mistrust in parties. This is about distrust in an entire system. And what this breeds is cynicism. And it's a cynicism. Sometimes people would say, a degree of skepticism is necessary for democratic politics, for competitive democratic politics. And that's absolutely vital. But this goes beyond skepticism into complete cynical abuse of process, of institutions, and of the trust of the public.
This really warrants, what you're teasing out there warrants a much broader discussion and debate, and I'm sure we're going to have it with some intensity, especially in the lead up to the next election. I don't have much time on my side, Ebrahim, but I would like your thoughts very quickly on this, telescoping out of the coalition discussion. Let's appraise the president's insistence that he will answer the nation through due legal and parliamentary processes. These are the terms now. Given his response to Parliament this week, does his commitment to accountability seem hollow?
I'm afraid that's the only conclusion we can draw, because hiding behind what you would call due process that's before the courts does not preclude answering some of the questions legitimately which have been placed by Parliament. And remember, the last time, Iman, parties behaved in this way, and particularly a majority party which behaved in this way, they shielded and used their majority not to allow an independent Parliament to conduct robust oversight, but used the majority in crude ways to shield the head of the executive from any kind of probity and any kind of accountability. So what you have here is a dual problem. The dual problem is the destabilization of an independent institution. It is the abuse of majority to shield any kind of public probity and accountability. And it is to detract from the role of that public institution. So when I talk about Parliament and I speak about institutional ambiguity, we now have institutional ambiguity rising from the local council right up to the national Parliament, because we don't know what purpose is this Parliament serving. The last time this happened, we found that we required a whole commission of inquiry into state capture and to malevolent corruption. And perhaps this is the way in which the public's trust is further eroded when public institutions can't play the role they do, and you hide here behind dual jeopardy. I'm hiding first behind process, and secondly, I use my party to shield me from any kind of probity.
Ebrahim, as always, an enlightening conversation. Thank you very much for your thoughts and your time. Ebrahim Fakir is with the Auwal Socio-Economic Research Institute. He is their Director of Programs.